Hello Horror Hounds, welcome to my horror house. It is James Herbert time again, and we are talking about his sixth novel and the first ever sequel he's written, but not the last. It is Lair from 1979, James Herbert's sequel to his debut novel, The Rats. So, after five novels where we have seen him try and expand and develop and grow, he returns to the well. He returns back to his first ever release, the smash hit breakout blockbuster novel The Rats. And I've got to say, on reread, this was the first bum note for me. The previous five, some I've liked more than others, but I've seen him trying out new things and trying to stretch and grow. And this seems like a little bit of a reduction. It's not a sequel in the movie sense where everything has to be a bit bigger and bad. It's not T2 to the Terminator. It's much more low key than that, to be perfectly honest. Whereas the Rats eventually culminated in a sort of rat plague of biblical proportions threatening to overwhelm London. This involves 4 years later, the straggly remnants, the survivors of that first novel, sort of finding their way to Epping Forest, digging down, setting their lair of the title, swelling their numbers until their numbers are such where they feel confident enough to make their presence felt again. But numbers nowhere near like the first novel. We're talking a few thousand rats at most. If you want more rat on human action and more of that gross stuff, James Herbert certainly delivers it, but it all seems fairly slim compared to what the original novel gave us. I mean, I would be much more bummed out about this if I didn't know that the third in the trilogy just expands beyond all those borders. And I remember it being an absolutely phenomenal read, and I'm really very excited to get back to that. I wonder why at this point he felt the need to return back to one of his old hits. This book follows... Christ, this is the thing. I finished it last night and I can't even remember the main character's first name. His surname is Pender. Now, to be fair, James Herbert does have a habit of calling his main characters by their surname, but Pender is one of the most forgettable leads in any James Herbert book to date. He's kind of a bland nothing. He works in the rat extermination business, which has, become a bit more prestige since the London event from the first novel 4 years previously. He's got a grudge against the rats because they killed his family in the first attack, and he just does what a James Herbert protagonist does. He turns up at a place, he gets embroiled in the events, he meets a woman, and there's an instant attraction between the both of them. There's a bit of a will they won't they, there's a sex scene, and then there's a culmination, but it all seems much more low key than what has come before in Herbert's writing. So yeah, there are more rat attacks. If you want that, they're there, and they're delivered with the skill and aplomb of a writer he's a really decent writer. So I can't really fault the book for that per se. I can't put my finger on anything he's done wrong, because he's done nothing wrong. It feels like maybe a little bit of a retread, therefore a retrograde step in his career, and it's going to be fun, interesting seeing how the next book plays out, because his next book is The Dark, which is essentially a retread of his second novel, The Fog. Weirdly, it feels too safe because the scale of it is so small. The rats never leave the forest, and although that is a huge area we're talking about, but it seems like it's always sort of contained. It never threatens to explode over like it did at the end of the first novel. So the culmination in the Lair is really kind of like low key. The stakes feel lower, which is really strange, and really strange for Herbert. Yeah, only a couple of things really stood out from when I read this decades ago now first, and that's the character of the Flasher, which is kind of a bizarre recurring character throughout the novel, and that has always stuck in my brain, I guess, because you don't really come across characters like that in novels. This guy goes into the forest so he can flash women, and that's how he gets his rocks off. The sex scene stuck in my head from reading it as a kid. It was one of those ones, one of his sex scenes that just stuck in my noggin, and I got to it and I was like, oh, this is the book that's got the sex scene with the bath in. Oh, okay, yeah, I remember that bit. And those were about the only two things I remembered from when I first read it, and that's not a great sign. My memory's not the greatest, but having reread it, there's not really much else that jumps out from this. It just falls a little flat from me. So maybe that is the reason that those were the two things that stuck out in my young, impressionable mind, because the rest of the book is fairly pedestrian. I hate to say it, but at least I know now that in this read through of Herbert, who I love, I'm not just going to endlessly praise him, and if something doesn't hit the mark for me, at least I'm comforted now enough to know that I can be critical of him. But no, it's not for me. But I'm personally, as a fan of the man, glad that this is not the end of the Rats, and I'm very keen to get to the next instalment, because I remember that being an absolute doozy. But next time, for us, it will be his remix of the Fog, and we will see what happens next with The Dark.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.